Nora Speaks is a weekly podcast that tugs at the soul and consciousness of the Black community. With show topics such as youth empowerment, education, women's impact, and civic engagement, Nora Speaks challenges the listener to not only join the movement, but be the movement. On the show, you'll learn from insightful guests who have demonstrated capacity in these fields and more, and I'm your host, Nora Muhammad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast, and I am your host, Nora Muhammad. I am so glad that you have joined me in another episode of the podcast, and I am excited to be back in the studio. I'm excited to be back with you, my dear listeners and the supporters of the Nora Speaks podcast. I am really, truly grateful for all of the support that you give to the podcast, for all of the support that you give me. Thank you for the kind words that you share. It really does mean a lot. I'm grateful that this program is apparently having its intended, desired impact on our community. And I hope that as you are listening and enjoying the show and what's being shared here, that you would take the time to share this with your friends, with your listeners, with your network. And then if you have listeners, share it with your listeners as well. But share it with your friends, share it with your network, share it with your family, share it on social media. And if you have an Apple or iTunes account, please go and leave a review on Apple or iTunes. Leave a review, leave a rating, and let me know what you think about the podcast. And that's another way to let others know, so that if they're searching around for decent content or content that's specifically about the Black community, and if they come across the Nora Speaks podcast in their search, then they'll see a comment, your comment, that would encourage them to listen. And there are other streaming platforms that also allow you to leave a comment, whether it's a comment on the show in general or a comment about a particular episode. I'm really interested in your feedback. I'm grateful for the emails, for the messages that I get on Facebook and on Instagram. I'm thankful that you would take the time to leave feedback, but I encourage you to do so on the podcast streaming apps, Apple, Podchaser, wherever you're getting this podcast, because it is a way to bring more listenership to the show and bring more attention to the show. And I say this without vanity, but I believe that this podcast produces messages that people need to hear. Our people need to hear. We have to have an alternative to what's shared in the mainstream. We need an alternative to the messages that are targeting us, that comes from mainstream media. And we simply need an alternative. I believe in choice, and I believe that for a person to make a choice or be qualified in their choice, then they have to have information. And we need as much information as possible. We need as many options as possible, because here we have a time that is more critical than ever. And there's so much that's happening around the world. There's so much that's happening in our country. There's so much happening in our communities. And the people, our people, we need alternatives. When you think about some of the television content, for instance, that is broadcast at the same time that world news is broadcast, the content that's broadcast to us, Black people specifically, is generally that which is designed to make us laugh. It's designed to take our attention from what is happening in the world, while people who are concerned are watching world news and tuned in to what's happening and what's going on. The content that is geared towards us is usually that which is going to make us laugh. It's some kind of scandal, but it's not much that we can take seriously. And I think that this is a time that we must take seriously. We must take ourselves seriously, and we must take our responsibility to ourselves very, very seriously. And that is what we're going to talk about in this episode of the Nora Speaks, my episode back from a brief hiatus. I usually take the month of December off, or I take a few weeks off, and I regroup, I refocus. However, this time I decided, let me try January and see how I feel about that. And I'll tell you, I really appreciated having January off. And I say off. Sure, there were still episodes that were, produced each week that you could listen to, rewind episodes, and some of my favorite episodes from 2020. However, just because I was off and not producing and publishing new content, I wasn't off. There's always work to do. And I found myself working in other capacities. I found myself working on myself, and really thinking about what I want for 2021, for my personal life, what I want for this podcast, and other aspects of my life. And I found it to be a very nice time of reflection. I really like that I didn't come into a new year racing. Like, so sometimes we do, January 1st comes, we had a New Year's Eve, and then all of a sudden it's just back to business. And you think, well, where is that transition? And I found that January was a nice transition for me, to come into the new year. And as I said in episode 146 or 145, I'm not sure, but I talked about taking the month of December as a principle every year for myself, that I do a month of abstinence, fasting, abstaining from food and water and any drink from during daylight hours, and abstaining from junk food entertainment, junk food media, doing a lot of reading, doing a lot of reflecting. So to have that time in December of cleansing, and then to have that month of January in transition and planning and strategizing the upcoming year specifically for this podcast, I found it to be really rewarding. And it looks like that may be something I'll continue in this podcast journey. For Nora Speaks, that I would have a hiatus in January and come back fresh with new episodes and new content in February. So again, welcome to episode 147. I'm grateful to be back with you, and I'm grateful to continue what Nora Speaks does, which is tugs on the soul and consciousness of the Black community. And before I get into the content of this specific episode, I do want to let you know to listen for the entire episode, because at the end, I will be discussing something special. I'm doing something a little bit different coming into the new year. And that is a special giveaway. And I want you to listen for that. That information is going to be coming at the end of this episode. So here we are. We're finding ourselves in 2021. We came from a very strange January with the Capitol rioters, the insurgency as they've been called. We had the presidential election that seemed to not be solidified, although some thought it was solidified. Some still don't think it was solidified. And, we had the Georgia runoff races for the Senate seats there. And it's just been a lot. We have the ongoing pandemic that many of us are managing, dealing with personally, trying to stay safe and healthy, deciding whether or not we're going to take the vaccine. A lot has been going on. We're coming from a year where we've had publicized, videotaped killings of unarmed Black men. We've had marches of people all around the country. We're coming through a lot. We're coming into a lot. And so as we are so excited and, to have a woman as a vice president of this nation, to have a Black woman, I know that is very meaningful to so many of us. And we are wishing, hoping that we will see meaningful change with this new administration. And we desire meaningful change, and we hope that they will be diligent in creating meaningful change, creating fairness and equity in their respective offices. That said, though, I do want to make sure we don't lose focus. We don't get too comfortable, because we have a black vice president, black and, Asian Indian. I don't want us to get comfortable. I don't want us to think that we've arrived. We are so far from what we need to arrive to. So in this episode, what I'm sharing with you, and I want you to share with others, is that racism is not the biggest problem that we have in this country as blacks in America. Racism is not the biggest problem that we have. And just for definition's sake, I think it's clear for us to differentiate and understand the difference between racism and prejudice, or racism and bigotry. Racism is specifically a system. It's a system by which people or governments oppress others by denying them access to the general freedoms of citizens. And so you may hear many black people say that we're not citizens in this country, specifically descendants of slaves, that we are not citizens, that the very Constitution is defined by declining its slaves access and rights. The Constitution and the amendments in the Constitution are put there because there have been intentional disenfranchisement of people, groups, including women, that prohibit us from full access and accessing all of the rights and entitlements of an American citizen. So when we're talking about racism, we're talking about an actual system. I'm not talking about the next door neighbor that doesn't like black people. And he's not a teacher. He's not a school administrator. He's not a judge. He's not a police captain. He has no way to infuse his bias or his prejudice into anything systemic that can impact the access that other groups have. He's just one person that doesn't like an entire group of people for whatever reason. I'm not talking about prejudice. I'm not talking about not liking a group. I'm talking about an entire system. And I think that's important because sometimes as black people talk about loving themselves and affirming what it is to be black, some of us will say, well, you don't want to be a reverse racist. And if we are not in a position to have a system that keeps others from rights and access and freedoms, well, that's not racism. Self-love, self-pride, I think everybody should have it. I don't get offended when someone says white power or white love. I think that we should, each group of people should want to be powerful and should want to love themselves. I'm in favor of that. I'm in favor of people thinking that they're the best. I mean, if you're on a team, you think that your team is the best, or you want your team to think that your team is the best. People have a right to self-pride. The damage and the hurt comes when that feeling, that love, that affection that one has for themselves creates an impediment, intentionally or unintentionally, that prevents others from accessing general freedoms. So when I'm talking about racism for the purpose of this conversation, I'm talking about a system. And, we know that America has so many systems in which racism is infused inside these systems that create hardship for black people. However, that system that creates hardship for us, it is not the biggest problem that we have. It is not the most severe problem that we have in this country. And we definitely have issues that are much more pressing than racism. Now, racism is a big problem, and we don't like racism. However, there are issues that we have to acknowledge, acknowledge, and deal with so that we can get to the issue of racism. But racism is not top on our list. It shouldn't be top on your list or my list, because we have issues inside of our own group that we have to deal with, such as we're self-hating, we are self-debasing, we are self-destructive, we are neglectful of our own common needs. We burden others with these needs that we have, and we think it's okay to put the burden of our needs on other people. And what I've just said, it may sound harsh and it may sound sharp, but it's true, and we have to confront our own issues. It is easy to look at the other guy. It is easy to look at the other person and say, this person needs to change. What this person is doing, what this person is thinking, how this person is speaking, that's not right. That needs to change. But let's hold a mirror up to ourselves. What are we doing? How are we thinking? And how are we speaking? And when we can reform the way that we think so that our thinking can lead to productive language, which can inspire productive actions, it is very difficult for us to highlight and amplify those issues that other people have that negatively impact us when we have issues right here within our own communities, within our own families, within our own race, so-called race of Black people, that we have yet to deal with. We are self-hating, we are self-debasing, we are self-destructive, we are neglectful of our own needs and responsibilities, and we put these responsibilities on others when we do have the ability to meet and address our own needs. Don't take this to mean that I think that racism isn't a problem. It's a terrible thing. It's a cruel thing. However, it would impact us, Black people, much less if our mindset, if our thoughts and our attitudes were for the freedom of our own. At this point, our thoughts and our attitudes are on the expectation that Joe Biden, it's on the expectation that Kamala Harris, it's on the expectation that the mayor, it's on the expectation that the governor, it's on the expectation that the teacher in the school are going to address and come to meet and serve our needs without us doing it first and believing that it is our responsibility to step into. So what I believe that we should have is our attitudes and thoughts that have the expectation and intention to do for ourselves. If we had the thoughts and expectations to do for ourselves, racism would not be such a problem. Racism is a problem for us because we are dependent on this system. We're dependent on those who create and structure the system. We're dependent on those who legislate and enforce the system. We're dependent on them to meet our daily needs, let alone the needs that we have as an entire nation. We talk about healthcare, right? We're talking about education. Heck, we can talk about toilet paper. We can talk about our water supply. We are totally dependent, and we do not have the idea that it is possible or good or likely that we should consider how we can be a nation within a nation. I mean, think about how people think about us. And maybe this isn't something that we talk about or think about much. America was not founded with the intention that Black people have freedom, justice, and equality. Now, it is true that all people should have freedom, justice, and equality. However, this country, the root of this country, the foundation of this nation was not to serve us. However, you'll say, but Nora, we're here, right? And yes, and in being here, we should have freedom, justice, and equality. And we should have freedom, justice, and equality for and of ourselves, not just depending on the other man to meet our needs. And so when Caucasian people, some of them, recognize that there are laws or there are things that are changing, or they think that things are going to change to disenfranchise them, they don't like that. They get afraid, they get angry, they get resentful. They don't want affirmative action. They don't want entitlement. They say, no, these people are coming and they're taking what's ours. Well, think about their mindset. Think about their roots, because we have to come to terms with the fact that America was not founded for us or by us, right? Amerigo Vespucci, he wasn't coming here for us, right? Christopher Columbus, he wasn't coming here for black people. So in consideration of a group of people who took the land from the indigenous people who lived here, think about a group of people who took people from another continent, brought them across the Atlantic Ocean, trained us in such a way to be pliant slaves, putting fear in us, castrating our men, traumatizing our women. Our children are watching this and growing up in fear. These people grabbed this territory on this planet for themselves. And so now we want to come in and we want to tell them, not only do we want our freedom, and we do want our freedom, but we want to tell them how we want them to treat us, what we want them to give us, how we want them to serve us. And they're saying, well, what about you doing something for yourself? This is what they're thinking. What about you doing something for yourself? Because this is for me. Well, that's not such an unreasonable thought. I say this because we have to give consideration to both sides, because that is at the root of the conflict between white and black people. White people think that we, some of them, are coming and taking something from them. And anybody who feels threatened can be dangerous, can be angry, can be resentful. And so here we are. We're coming for more. We're coming for more. We want more. We want more. We want more. And it's not that I'm saying we are not entitled to more, but is it their responsibility? They've educated us. They've trained us on their jobs, right? We know how to heal patients. We have doctors. We have nurses, right? We know how to build. We have engineers, right? Here we are continuing to look to them for more and more and more. And their forefathers freed our people, educated our people, trained our people, and we keep going back saying we want more. At what point are we going to do something for ourselves? And this is a question that we have to pose to one another. The awful incidents that we witnessed in 2020 in terms of the horrific taking of life of black people by state actors, including law enforcement. It's a horrific thing to think about. It's horrific to have witnessed. Families are traumatized, right? But let's think, is this just history repeating itself? And at what point is there a need for a separation where there's not a dependency? At what point are we going to recognize that maybe the idea of us looking to them to continue serving us and meeting our needs, they didn't include this Constitution. They didn't include us to be served in their Constitution. I'll say again, yes, we are here, but we don't have to be here and be dependent. We can clean ourselves up. We can train our own people. We can build our own houses. We can teach our children in their own schools. We talk about the 1776 project, and we reject that. We don't want that, right? Well, teach your own children. You can teach them what you want them to learn and then send them off to colleges and universities. You don't have to argue and fight for someone to teach your children. Well, we have the Amistad Project and we have to make sure that Black history is taught in school. You don't have to force people to teach your children in their schools what you want them to learn, when we have the possibility and the responsibility to educate our children ourselves. It is possible. We can do it. we have to recognize that we are responsible. We're responsible for our thoughts. We're responsible for our actions. And at this point, there is not a great showing amongst our people that we're loving ourselves. What does it mean to be loving? That we're not loving ourselves. Loving is doing. Loving is moving. Loving is producing. Loving is protecting. Loving is providing. Loving is maintaining, right? Now, all of that, we're looking for someone else to do it. We're looking for someone else to produce food for us. When we go to the supermarkets, we're looking for someone else to produce shelter for us, to produce clothing for us, to protect us in our own communities, right? To maintain us, to maintain our schools, to teach our children. We are putting the expectations on other people. And it is very hard to honor someone, to respect someone when they keep putting the burden of life's responsibility on someone else. I'll break this down and maybe make this a little more personal. You're in your home. You bought it. You are paying your bills. You're bringing home groceries. You're working. You're making a living. You've bought your children a car. You have a couple cars. It's cool in the summer because you have air conditioning. It's warm in the winter because you have a heating system. Now imagine the people next door. Now they let their house fall apart. Now, yeah, they could repair it, but they don't. They could go to work and earn money, but they don't want to. They want to send their children to your house for a warm meal. No, they're not going to buy their children. They want you to buy their children a car. They want you to help maintain their household by paying their electric bill, their gas bill, so that they can be warm in the winter or cool in the hot heat of the summer. They're putting it on you. Their children have outgrown their shoes, so they want you to provide shoes for their children. Think about it. And you say, man, I mean, I don't mind giving you a cup of sugar. I don't mind giving you a cup of flour. I don't mind giving you a cup of milk. But how much more are you going to ask me for? Right? And so that's what this nation is thinking about us. How much more are you going to ask me for? I am grateful that Kamala Harris is the vice president. I'm happy for her. I'm happy for her family. How exciting it must be. I hope that as the sister is sitting in such a powerful seat, that she would give consideration to the needs, not just of people in the country, but specifically to her people. We are often forgotten, especially when we have a black person that's in a seat of power, because we don't want to be seen as in any way favoring our own. When, look, it is natural. You don't have to be unfair, but it is natural to incline towards your own. And we want to deny that natural inclination as if that's something wrong. No, we have to be balanced, but still serve your people, just like you serve other groups and special interest of people. Don't deny your people because you don't want to appear to be favoring or biased. Still serve your people and be fair to everyone. Racism is not the biggest problem that we have in the black community. The lack of love that we have for ourselves, that is the biggest problem. The lack of knowledge that we have for ourselves, that is the biggest problem. Yet we talk black love, and we'll put it on our t-shirts and we'll put it on our hats. We'll talk about how black lives matter, but we don't show that we value black lives like we should, because if we value black lives and we would serve black lives with our black selves, but we keep putting the responsibility on others. And that is why racism can impact us so deeply, because we're so dependent on that system, right? Look, disengage, disengage from that system and develop your own system. I'm not talking about segregation. Sometimes when we talk about separating from people who don't like you or mistreat you, you know, a lot of our minds go to segregation. That is not what this conversation is about. But I am suggesting that we have to end dependency. There are trillions of dollars that pass through the hands of the Black community. So it's not like we don't have the money. We don't have the love. We don't have the unity. We don't have the ambition or will to do for ourselves. And so much of what we need is right here in self. Racism is a problem because we have not done anything for self. Racism is a problem because we remain dependent. And so what I want to challenge the listeners is to think about how we can, as a community, move forward. Again, it's easy. It's easy to blame the other guy. But I say, what about us? What about us? What about what our young people are doing in the community? What about our nieces and our nephews and our sons and our daughters that are doing crime, that are using drugs, selling drugs, that are not taking advantage of opportunities? What about us who are putting the responsibility to care for our families, to care for our seniors, to care for our children at the footstep of someone else? We have been educated. We have been well trained. Now we should be self-respecting people and take the education and the training and do something for self, and we will be so much more respected. You know, it's hard to respect the neighbor that comes over and he's dogging everybody that lives in the house with him. He's not in unity with the people that he lives with, but he wants to be in unity with me in my house. He wants to be in unity with you in your house. He wants to work cooperatively with you and yours, but he's not doing it with his. And you say, I hear you. Yeah, you're a nice guy, but I can only go so far with you because I can't trust you because you have not demonstrated the ability to be in unity with your own. And guess what? There's only one of you. There's only one. You're an individual. But you show up collectively with you and yours, and now we're talking about something. Now I see that you have the capacity, and I see that you have the will to work with me. But in the meantime, if you just want to be an individual, you want to abandon your own, you want to come latch on to mine, take all the benefits of the labor that I put in, that is not a favorable picture for anyone. So we can do better. If we think that racism is the biggest problem that Black people have, we have sorely missed the mark. We have been miseducated. We don't know what's going on. We've been misled. But I'm here to tell you, racism is not the biggest problem that we have. The biggest problem comes from lacking knowledge of self, lacking love of self, lacking ambition of will to do for self. If we did that, loved ourselves, did for self, and had the ambition to do for self, then racism wouldn't even be something that we would talk about because it wouldn't impact us. Not to the degree that it impacts us now. So this is something that's been on my mind. You know, we've come through this election, and there was a lot in 2020 that I didn't say because I didn't want to discourage our people from participating as a citizen in voting, and I didn't want to say anything that could be misconstrued as discouraging about a particular candidate or a particular political party. You know, I think that it's always good to choose the right time and the right place to say a thing. And so now that things have settled, and now that the election is resolved, and now that Biden is in and Trump is out, and we're so happy about that. All right, brothers and sisters. Now what are we going to do for self? What are we going to do for self? What is it that we're going to contribute as a group, as others contribute as a group? Are we going to contribute to more neediness, or are we going to show the world that we have something to offer other than singing, dancing, and dunking a basketball? Great, we have athletic prowess. Great, we have artistic talent, but it takes a lot more. It takes a lot more. And I hope with all that we have had the opportunity, because our former slave master has educated us and trained us well, that we would do something for ourselves. It is time. It is time to do it now. I want to thank you so much for listening. And as I said at the beginning of this episode, I wanted to talk about something I'm doing just a little bit differently. Beginning this year, I have a giveaway. The first 3 listeners who repost, it doesn't matter what post on Instagram, but if you repost and tag Nora Speaks Podcast and post why you are a loyal listener, you will receive a free Nora Speaks coffee mug for only free $99, also known as free. So this is for the first 3 listeners who tag Nora Speaks podcast in their Instagram post and post why you are a loyal listener. I'm excited to see who's going to be first, second, and third. And once you tag me, I will reach out to you to get your details so that we can get your Nora Speaks coffee mug delivered to your home. So I'm excited. You can go to Nora Speaks Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. You can take a look at the mug. The mug has been posted. You can take a look at it for yourself. The first 3 listeners who tags Nora Speaks Podcast with a repost and post why you're a loyal listener. The first 3, only the first 3, maybe the first 4. You will get a Nora Speaks coffee mug to your home. And I will also make sure I give you a shout out on the podcast in appreciation for your support. I want to thank you again for listening. It's always a pleasure. It's so good to be back. And you stay tuned for some really great episodes from people who are doing real things to contribute to the needs of our community. Until next time, stay in peace. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nora Speaks Podcast. Be on the lookout for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And as always, if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, visit my website, noramahammed.com. Or if you have a listener question, email me at info@noraspeaks.com. You can also follow the Nora Speaks Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nora Speaks Podcast. I'll be sure to include links in the show notes. If this show has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.